All right, welcome to week 2 of the Irish course. We're about to start regular classes as well, so good luck to all of you on the beginning of class, the first week, syllabus week. Hope it goes well. Okay, in these introductory to the week videos, really what I want to do is a couple things. Number one, give you just the preview of what you have to do for the week, which should be a reminder as well, because I'll send you that information and it'll also be posted on Blackboard. And number two, just give you a little preview of the readings. The readings are not always easy. They can be challenging. So I want to kind of guide you at least a little bit in terms of what to expect. Okay, so for this week, week 2, you have a number of things to do. One is watch 3 videos. This is one of them. The other one is my recap video from week 1. And there's also the first 25 minutes of the Story of Ireland video. We're going to be watching these videos in conjunction with the course, so we'll watch kind of the time frame that is relevant to the particular section of the course we're doing, and as related to the video. So in this week, it's the first 25 minutes. They're great videos. They're produced by BBC. There's a series of 5 of them, and they take you from the very origin of Irish history to present-day Ireland. So that's a lot of fun and going to be very educational. Okay, the reading for this week. You've got to read snippets or excerpts from both books. So in terms of how the Irish saved civilization, it's going to be, this is pages 71 through 97. And then a history of Irish thought. You're going to read about the Irish Augustine. He's the first Irish thinker that we'll study, and that's pages 1 through 17 in a history of Irish thought. In terms of submissions this week, there's no quiz, but you do have to post 4 full submissions to the week 2 discussion boards. Always remember, one of those submissions has to be a post to one of the original prompts. One of those submissions has to be a response to either your classmate or myself. I will try to answer as many of your posts as possible. Certainly, if you want to have your post responded to, I think Friday would be kind of the latest you would need to get it in to guarantee a response. Because if you post them kind of at the end of the week on Sunday afternoon, evening, I certainly can't guarantee that I'll get to that. And that's also going to be negative in the sense that if you're posting them kind of at the end of the week, you're procrastinating that long, you won't be able to read as many of your classmates' posts. I won't have time to respond to you. So I highly encourage you to get those posts in the first half of the week. Better for the class and better for you. So one is an original response to a prompt. One has to be a response to a classmate or myself. And the other 2 can be either, which means that you don't necessarily have to respond to each of the discussion prompts each week. All right. Hopefully my throat will get through this. All right, so that's the kind of logistics. In terms of this week, there's the Thomas Cahill. His section, really he's taking you through kind of the attitudes and the worldview of the ancient Irish. And the ancient Irish were predominantly Celtic, but before the Celts invaded and came aboard and came into Ireland, there were some indigenous people there that kind of had traveled not necessarily as a group, but had populated the land a little bit, farmed some of it, and so the Celts took them over. And what we find about these early Irish is they're really, really wild. They're living for the moments. They're what we would call in philosophy today hedonistic. So you've got these stories from the Táin, and the Táin is a history of some of these early Irish people and figures. And so you've got Queen Mebed. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but she is bold. Her husband essentially says, look, you're lucky to have a guy like me. I've raised you up from where you were at. And she responds, I was doing quite fine without you, and I would have been fine had you never come into my life. And so they have this contest where they try to see who has the most cattle. has a claim to superiority. Turns out she lost, but then she tries to make this deal with this other Ulster king in another province, and he agrees. But she said, "Look, if you didn't agree, essentially I would have killed you." And she's willing to sleep around to kind of get what she wants. There's kind of, it's a no hold bars portrait that you get of these early inhabitants of Ireland. So they're not Irish yet. I mean, Ireland as a nation is still far, far in the future, but they're the first inhabitants of what is to become Ireland. And, they're willing to go out and they fight naked, they fight, to the death, the people that encounter them, these naked, warring, horn-blowing kind of warriors, so that it really looks like you're kind of entering into hell, the gates of hell. And so they don't believe, they realize, they recognize more than most that life is fleeting. You have the here, you have the now, and kind of their mantra, their kind of philosophy, you might say, is to maximize your experience in this life, maximize your pleasure, and that's kind of the deal with them. And part of what they were doing, at least Cahill and others think, is they had these great fears of death. So they would live for the moment. They would build themselves up. They would make themselves appear tougher maybe than even they thought they could be, because there was this kind of subconscious dread, this fear beneath them. They were people of action. They were not thoughtful people. They weren't reflective. They weren't going to kind of step back and say, is this the right thing to do? Should I go have sex with this guy? Should I, chop this other person's head off? They lived by impulse. They lived by desire. And that's the characteristics of those early Irish. But again, bold. Now we go to the Irish Augustine. And so he's part of the early Christianization of this land, where they're going from Celts to Christians. And he writes this book, De Mirabilis. And it's interesting because it's talking about, really, its focuses on miracles, a whole book on miracles. And you might say, well, that's just ridiculous, that's not important, who cares? But his central preoccupation in this book is to try to say that miracles, and remember, he's a Christian guy, he's a Christian priest, Christian missionary, say that miracles are compatible, they work well with the laws of nature that God has set up. So his book is to try to show that in all these different cases of Christian history, where there are miracles that occur, that these miracles are not contradicting the laws of nature, that they don't violate those laws of nature. And again, we might say, well, that is an utter waste of time. Who the hell cares? Why? And that's, kind of central to your discussion post questions. And it comes down to this idea that the Irish Augustine enters this world of the Celts that are wild, that are over the top, that are also believe in magic, and that also believe that some individuals can control the world, and by spells and things like that. And what he wants to do is to essentially say, look, that's not how the world works. That's not how a creation provided by an all-good, all-loving, all-wise, rational God operates. It's not just like, I want to change nature and therefore I can do it. No, we've got to look to these laws that God has created, God sustains. And so that's a big reason why he wants to say that miracles aren't just simply kind of chaotic, aren't simply events that contradict nature, contradict its laws, so on and so forth, because then you're getting closer to the pagan understanding of the world. And it's this understanding that the Irish Augustine and others want to convert. They want to bring these people on board with a more Christian worldview. And so then what the Irish Augustine does is essentially looks at a whole bunch of different miracles, events, starting with Noah, talks about the virgin birth, talks about Lot's wife and the loaves of bread and fish, where Jesus, multiplied them and fed the whole 5,000 off an original just basket. It talks about Moses turning the Nile red with blood and the plagues. It talks about God changing Moses into a serpent. And it talks about the idea of sending manna, food from heaven, and the star that the Magi looked at when they were tracking Jesus and how it moved. And so, for each of these individual miracles, what the Irish Augustine is going to attempt to do is to say, here's why it's not completely ridiculous. Here's why it's not completely just fiction and fantasy and contradictory to everything we know about how the natural world operates. He's going to say it's different, it's unusual. It oftentimes can be a speeding up of a certain natural process, is one way he explains it. But it's not fundamentally different. And so one of your jobs in the discussion board posts is to look at one of these individual kind of miracles and just explain, how does it work? How does the virgin birth, the seemingly most unnatural thing you can imagine, how is that compatible with the idea that nature operates according to these laws that God has created? And so that's your task. As always, I'm here for questions, and if you have confusions or comments, feel free to contact me.